wise man who's not from the east, but his name is Solomon Sewanja.
Don't we all love him? Yeah. Let's give him another round of applause. Great. I love you too, man.
Love you so much.
All right, guys. So first of all, I just want to say I'm super excited to be here, and it's good to have all of you here. I work with the African Institute for Investigative Journalism, and all that we do here is we believe in using investigative journalism as a tool for advocacy. So we do the stories, we launch them, and we use them to actually cause social change. And investigative journalism has the power. So I just wanted to tell you about a short story. So we have, just before you roll that slide, perhaps if you can go back. I come from this space that when social evil and injustice happens in our communities, and we who have the voices to speak up decide to keep quiet because we feel less concerned, we are betraying our own selves, because it will certainly come back to you, right? And for example, there's sometimes when I'm doing some crazy stories and someone's like, don't you fear they'll kill you, they'll arrest you. I'm currently working on an investigation on money that was meant to procure COVID-19 vaccines that hasn't been seen, about $18.5 billion shillings. It just went missing, and we are still trying to trace it. And so one person asked me this week, you're sniffing out, but don't you fear that these guys can actually kill you? And I'm saying, look, if this money goes missing and none of us pays attention that this money is being swindled and stolen, then the next time we will not have the money to vaccinate people. And when the third wave comes, all of us will die, including me. And so we believe in investigative journalism. And so this is why I'm encouraging all of you in your different spaces, when you get an opportunity to speak up, speak up. Don't stay quiet. Right? Great. So the African Institute for Investigative Journalism has 5 core programs, one of which is the training and capacity building program, where we train journalists in investigative reporting. We have another program where we give out small grants to investigative journalists who are working on different projects. We also work on collaborative investigative journalism, where we bring guys together to work on an investigation, as well as also through the collaboration we have with the Uganda Law Society, we try to provide services, legal services, to journalists arrested. Now, our latest innovation is the iRoom, which is why I'm here to speak about the iRoom. Let's go to the next slide. So, I've told you about investigative journalism, and indeed journalism is about telling stories that can cause political, economic, and social change. That's what it's all about. Journalism is all about changing the communities. If you do a story and it has no impact at all, then you may have to revisit your story. And so you have to go with that mindset that I'm doing a story to cause social change. Let's go to the next slide. But many of the stories that are being done are done by us Kampala journalists. Most of the stories, think about it. Rural journalists, or in many of our dailies, they have one page that has to cover east, west, central, people up country. Now, many of the investigations that are done by Kampala-based journalists, right? I'll give you a classic example. This story. This was the architectural model of the proposed Akibo Stadium, ladies and gentlemen. It was quite beautiful if you look at the artistic model. Look at it, the Akibo Stadium. Government allocated money to build this stadium and to bring it to light. When MPs were looking and sniffing around whether this stadium had been built, let's go to the next slide, that's what they found. So, this was the constructed Akibo Stadium. We all remember this story, don't we? When we all laughed and we're like, whoa, so is this the Akibo Stadium, really? Now, hold on, go back to the other slide. Yeah, so what happened is that this story came to light because MPs had gone to investigate and they went with a media crew from parliament, and the media crew from Kampala are the ones that actually put this story out. But we have journalists in northern Uganda who could have taken interest in, how was this constructed, who was given the contract to construct the stadium, how much money was allocated, what was the progress of work. And so we realized that there are very many rural journalists and rural stories that are not told or investigated at rural level, that they will always have to send someone from Kampala to go and do an investigation. Now, I have been in the newsroom for the last 13 years of my life, and even when I am told to go and do an investigation in Karamoja, they don't trust the correspondent in Karamoja who understands the terrain very well to do an investigation. What they do is they say, Solo, get on the next car, you'll work with the correspondent as a fixer rather than the correspondent doing the story themselves, right? And so what we have seen in many of the newsrooms is they will send a Kampala-based reporter to go to Gulu or to go to Masindi or anywhere to actually do these investigations. What are they trying to tell you? You're not good enough to handle this investigation, and therefore you need a senior person to come and handle that investigation. And your role as a rural-based journalist is to support the big boss. And sometimes we don't even give them bylines, So Solomon Serwanja takes all the credit. He does the pieces to camera, he does the narration, he does all these things, and at the end of the day, it is Solomon Serwanja the star. Now, that is very demoralizing for many of the journalists who report from our country. And this really calls out to how do we be able to train these journalists in investigative skills and share with them so that they can produce these investigations from the rural area, and that these stories make it to the front pages of our main dailies. I think that's one of the things that the iRoom is about. Let's go to the next slide, and I'll speak a little bit about it. So, we all know about how press freedom is in this country. A few weeks back, I was speaking at the European Union about how journalists were beaten and tortured. And I was speaking this in front of the minister, and the minister just, stood up and said, "But you, Solomon, you're always negative. You're always talking about negative things about government. Why don't you talk about something good that government did that time?" I said, well, but that same very government that did good stuff also did this. So it's also good that we talk about it. But the iRoom, and I wanted to tell you about the iRoom. It's an online platform where we want rural journalists to publish their stories, and we bring them onto the national debate, right? So what will happen is, let's go to the next slide, and I wanted to take you through how it looks like. Now, so the iRoom will have contributors, or has contributors. So we have the journalists, and we are pretty much looking at the rural journalists who will be working on these investigations at local level. They will review their budgets given to their districts, follow up as to whether this road has been worked on, how much has been spent, how much has been stolen. So they understand the terrain very well, and so they will do their stories, and then what we will do, we will curate them, and I'll tell you a little bit that in just a second, and then publish them and launch them and use them as stories for advocacy. The other people who will be looking at that will contribute to the iRoom are human rights organizations. Now, human rights organizations and other organizations, they always go out to the field and collect different data and research. What happens is that when they do those reports, they come and they just put them on their shelves, and so they gather dust. For example, the Human Rights Watch report is done, the Uganda Human Rights Commission is, all these reports that are done. For example, the Auditor General's report, it's all there, and it's lying in the shelves of different offices, but it has lost life. So what we will do is use those reports and give them life, right? How many of us have taken time to look at the Auditor General's report on COVID-19 expenditure in this room? No hand has been raised. And this speaks to the fact that those reports only is pen and paper, and they don't have any life in them. And so what we want to do is work with these organizations, whether human rights or audit firms or whatever, to get the content that they have discovered in their different research papers, investigate them further, and give them life, right? Do we know that 6 billion shillings right now cannot be accounted for in the COVID-19 accountability during the first wave? None of us knows. But all that is in the Auditor General's report. It's also in the report produced by the Parliamentary Committee on COVID-19 expenditure. So there's a lot of content that is gathered that stays in the reports and they don't have life. So what do we want to do? We want to get into the reports and follow the money, or follow the content in those reports, give them life, and relaunch them again to use them as tools for advocacy. So this is what happens. So the content comes in from the organizations and the journalists. We take them through the processing part. So we will filter the information that comes, or the stories that come in. We will have an editor-in-chief who will relook through the content and approve it, and then we will post it onto the iRoom. Now, I am really happy to say that we got funding from the Digital Human Rights Lab that helped us set up. Let's go to the next, and then I can tell you. So this is the entire, model of the iRoom. So the iRoom, we will have the public consume this information on the iRoom. We will have the journalists in mainstream media, and we will be working in partnership with journalists from legacy media, New Vision, NBS, NTV, whoever, so that they can republish some of this content. And then we have, of course, the organizations that can come on it, and then they can reuse this information better. At the tail end of all this is, how do we actually use journalism as a tool for advocacy, right? And so we got some funding from the Digital Human Rights Lab to do this. I am happy to announce that the iRoom was created. It's a platform. It is there. We have set up everything, servers, space, security, everything is there. So can we clap for us? So, of course, we want to do curated investigative stories at local level to bring them to the national level to be able to call for accountability and social justice. Let's go to the next slide. This, what do we want with this iRoom basically? So when we do the stories, we want to reach as many people as we can. Like I told you, we will be partnering with different media organizations to get the stories of the iRoom and repurpose them, but we will also launch these stories like we've been doing, and I'll share with you some of them that we've done before, and we will launch them and hold panels and go to parliament and write reports, publish papers around those subjects, so that we can be able to reach as many people as possible, to motivate them to be part of the change that they want by pushing people to the limits, we hold them accountable using investigative journalism. Let's go ahead. So, but we believe in collaboration. And I was just speaking to my brother Bas, how can we collaborate together to push investigative journalism and use it as a tool for advocacy? I'll give you an example of where collaboration has yielded results. I had a project, the BBC Africa Eye, that many of you know. I think it was called Stealing from the Sick. We did it in collaboration. It was quite a heavy project, about $45,000, one investigation. We published that investigation. We went big with it. We partnered with local media, international media, and different people. Just one investigative story shook this country, and out of it, So many things have been done. I remember appearing before the Committee of Parliament to explain my investigation and my findings. But out of it, I know that the European Union has allocated a significant budget to the national medical stores to actually follow the medicine up to the last user. I know that, for example, the president, yes, I know that the president went on a campaign across the whole country to different hospitals, and on every platform you are saying, those doctors who are stealing medicine or medical workers who are stealing medicines, we will have you arrested and we will prosecute you. I know that one of the things that they are checking on the border points is medicine that is going out of the country which doesn't have any documentation, right? Especially along the Congo border. So what does this tell us? It tells us that there is a big power in collaboration and in investigations. We all know about the Panama Papers, right? We all know about the recent Pandora Papers that came out. It was out of collaborations. They had over 6,000 journalists sit on this pile of information, and they work on it together and they publish it. How about Kampala-based journalists collaborating with rural journalists, and along the way they share their experience, they share their might, and they can be able to generate a good investigation together so that we can grow their capacity. Rather than just boasting about us being stars, we empower the rural journalists to actually do investigations. We will show them, how do you do secret filming? How do you follow the money? How do you use Google Images and Google Maps? How do you use data? How do you use fact checking for you to be able to build a good investigation so that you take ownership, because it's you who lives in this community and therefore you know it better. And when you do your investigation, it shouldn't stop only at Radio Bunyoro or Karamoja FM. We actually can use that content and put it on the iRoom and also relaunch it at a national platform by collaborating with legacy media, so that your story doesn't seem to just be a local story, but it's actually a bigger story. And through that, we can actually push for impact up from this level to that level, instead of having to wait for the Auditor General's report for the previous year to be brought before Parliament next year, for Parliament to reopen the books and then summon people before the committee, so that the Parliamentary Press Association now reports from Parliament about a story that could have been done by a rural journalist. So basically that's what we want to do with the iRoom project, to empower rural journalists out there using their basic tools, like just the phone. How do you use phone video skills to actually do some recording? How do you use, your recorder? How do you do this, so that you can use the very little tools that you have to support your investigation. How do you write a script? How do you write a long form story to keep it interesting? So we will be teaching rural journalists about everything investigative journalism, so that they can be able to create their content. And this is my team. I'm the team leader. We have Raymond, we have Brian, who is the technical lead on the iRoom, who will be managing everything, and then the team there. We have Shemay, Sandra, and Grace. And Grace is from the Media Challenge Initiative. So thank you, Abbas, for giving us Grace, and Rahim. So I employ 2 people from the Media Challenge Initiative at the Institute, and I'm looking forward to bringing about another person from here, so to come and join us at the Institute as we continue to grow the Institute. So thank you very much, and we encourage you to come and be part of the change in empowering rural journalists to do investigative reporting in public interest. Thank you for listening to me.
So, Mr. Solomon Seranja, my question is, when investigating, there are some stories that are dangerous. So, how are we going to deal with that unsafety of those people there in the rural areas? Because for me, I think it's not that they don't have the capability, but there is that fear, you're doing a story when the neighbor is the one who did it, and you're there at the neighbor is where there you stay. Are you understanding what I'm trying to ask?
I think I have understood.
So their safety, our safety when investigating, because I'm more worried about that. You know, when you're going to do, there are some stories that are very dangerous. I know you're one of the victims.
Okay. Safety is very paramount in investigative journalism. So what we do, one of the stages in investigative reporting is assessing the safety and the risk. It's called a risk assessment of a story. If the story is going to be very risky, how can we tell it without having to use you? You know, you just wake up and get someone to come and voice the script, but the story will be out, right? Or do you want to be like an ass? Or do you want like to cover your face? So we go through a risk factor. There are stories that are really very dangerous. I can give you an example. If you're investigating an arms dealing between South Sudan and Uganda and how the guns cross the porous border in Kitgum, you know, and in Lamor, for example, at the border point of in the Lamor Hills, at the border point of South Sudan and Uganda, you've got to think through, you know, what's the risk factors involved, and having evaluated the risk, then you think, you know what, this is a story we can go for, and if we go for it, we're actually not going to use your face, we can work out something. But bottom line is those stories have to be told, right? So one of the things, and this is the most, I think, common question that they ask me, don't you fear for your life? Of course I do. I'm flesh and blood, right? A bullet can go through my body. I'm not any strange. But do I really want to keep quiet when some of those things are happening? You know, you will die also. You who is telling me that, do you fear to die? You will also die one day. So do I want to die when I have made a contribution to my community and to my society? Yes. That would be worth it, right? Rather than just having to fear everything. Tunacha tunakomawa.